there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world.
Ајде, мајката!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
The government of Zoran Zaev continues racking up records of a sort. In the latest series of country rankings in various areas such as corruption, the economy, or form of government, the Economist newspaper has labeled Macedonia a, quote, hybrid regime, unquote, in its Democracy 2020 index, and puts it in league with such democratic countries as Bolivia, Senegal, Montenegro, Tanzania, Moldova, Uganda, Bhutan, Lebanon, and Nigeria. Meanwhile, Bulgarian TV channels have demanded airtime on Macedonian airwaves, and at least one will be featured as Zoran Zaev continues cratering to the Bulgarians and giving them everything they demand. And while he's at it, Zaev's government has just purchased 200,000 doses of the coronavirus vaccine from China. When it gets there is anybody's guess. And there is talk of Kosovo joining with Albania to become a new state. We'll discuss all of this and more in this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin Shalimanov in Skopje, Macedonia, a city which will probably be among the first targets of this future new Grand Albanian state. Right, I'm right on the borderline.
Yeah, of course, the joke has always been, and I remember this, I've got 25 years of involvement in Macedonia and almost 30 in the Balkans. And so the joke is, I remember it way back when, was, sure, the Albanians all want to live in one big state, but the question is, where would the capital be? Tirana, Pristina, or Tetovo?
Or Bern, Switzerland.
Yeah, there we go. And that's where the real fighting begins, or frankly, Brooklyn, or, some other place where they hang out. So, yeah, that's always been the big question, of course, and there'd be lots of infighting amongst them, etc. But let's get to that in a moment. This is podcast episode 101, the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. We had the new intro with the last episode. I hope people liked it. I know you put a lot of hard work into that, and it's always fun to kind of mix things up a bit. So this is, so now we enter our next 100, which is a record of sort. Never thought we'd be doing it for this long. But speaking of records, and in with the monologue there, so I think last week we talked about, let's see, it was the corruption Transparency International, right? Yes, corruption. Transparency International, and how Macedonia hit a new low with its rankings, and now the Economist newspaper, which is technically a magazine, but it calls itself a newspaper, never figured that one out, in its Democracy 2020 index, calls Macedonia, the government, a hybrid regime, which even, without even defining what a hybrid regime is, it doesn't sound good. It ain't a democracy, that's for sure. And some of the other countries, Nigeria, Uganda, Moldova, that they're in the same league with. How did the government respond to that? It kind of on the corruption's perception index from Transparency International, I know they tried to do a little song, a little dance. What did they say on this one?
They were visibly hit by the Transparency International one, because it's the first time it's so bad. I mean, Macedonia has been dropping like a rock on this report. It was in the 60s in the world, like 60-something in the world under Gruevski, and now suddenly 105 last year, 111 this year. So it prompted, they tried to obscure it by saying it's a poll that measures the perception of corruption, not actual corruption.
Right.
But then, as we mentioned last episode, the U.S. ambassador came out very sternly with a stern comment, which really scared people in the government. She followed up on this with an interview afterwards discussing corruption at length. And it was clear it was for an Albanian news site which never asks a question which is not, pre-ordered by the U.S. Embassy. They wouldn't dare ask a question on their own. So, the very fact that she was asked about corruption and then she came back to it a couple of times really probably scared the government. And we're largely expecting some arrests in in the near future from SDSM ranks. Usually SDSM and Zaev only arrest
Usually they're
members.
arresting the opposition.
Yeah.
They're going to arrest their own people? Wow.
It will probably be targeted like pre-agreed victims. I doubt that it's going to be like a serious assault on, an actual clearing up of SDSM people, because they have to go all the way to the top. Zaev is definitely going to be involved. Embassy people will be involved. I don't know if you caught this. The son of the top political advisor of the embassy had his apartment searched. This is Mitko Bruchevsky. He's been eminence gris in the embassy. Yeah, he's pulling all the shots. Ambassadors come and go. He remains. And apparently his son...
I think... go ahead. I'll throw it in.
His son apparently has a license to produce marijuana. Obviously got it through Zaev, one of the bigger companies in the country, actually. And the one in Kosovo. And if you go to Kosovo now, it looks like the entire place, everybody's been smoking a joint all day long. And there's an odor to the city by now.
It's kind of an artsy-fartsy town.
Yeah, it's a little bit, yeah. And the guy was apparently producing the wrong type of marijuana, the one you export for, illegally, for illegal use, not for extraction of oil, and was producing much more than he should have, much greater concentration of the prohibited stuff. So he's under investigation. Obviously, we discussed other embassy people gone rogue, like David Stevenson in the past. So, if they investigate Zaev seriously, to the full extent, then a lot of embassy people will have to go down with him. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know.
And Mitko, you mentioned he's been around forever. I think Chris Hill, the first U.S. ambassador there, writes about Mitko in his book, Outpost. He literally was there since before it was a actual embassy. And I think informally he's referred to as Rasputin, correct? Because of the physical resemblance with the beard.
Yeah, recently he's been trying to catch the vibe, and also he's been talking erratically when you would meet him, like cryptically. Yeah, he's gone really off the rails. I use it. I think others use it. It's not like he's not really widely known figure in the populace, but yeah, in the informed circles, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I think I read a piece. So the Zaev's party, Citizen or Citisa, as we call it, without the M, they're getting ready for their party congress, I believe, and so they're doing a membership check. Is that correct, to see who's actually a member in good standing and who isn't?
Yeah, they're having officials like Zaev and others go around the individual party members into their apartments and re-updating their list of members, and then they're gonna have them I think vote electronically for a new party leader in March, late March, early April is the plan. And Zaev insists that he'll be a candidate, that he will allow opposing candidates. There was a major break over his position on Bulgaria with the Crvenkovski wing. So if Crvenkovski wants to do something, he can do it during this election of a new leader or in parliament as the votes of no confidence are now progressing. We'll see how that works. But there could be an interesting surprise sometime in March or April. If they really go the route of actual arrests for corruption, if there is really something more to what the U.S. ambassador is announcing, and Transparency International and The Economist are beginning to turn a critical eye on Zaev. If it's not just, a little prearranged housekeeping, to keep the public entertained, but with a few lower level people being arrested, but actual serious engagement, then it will be it could be in March around the Congress.
Right. Well, that is something that we'll keep an eye out for. Talking offline to one of our listeners who has a long history with the countries of southeastern Europe and as well as with Macedonia, and he reads a lot about it. A member of the one of the EU countries, and he was mentioning to me the other day that he just seemed to think, seemed to sense, seemed to note kind of a change in direction in the wind, so to speak, which I know is a phrase that Nikola Dimitrov likes to use, the wind at our backs. But our friend, who we both mutually know and talk with, seemed to think that just there's something out there. He can't quite put his finger on it, but there's a turning of sorts against Zaev and his government from all sorts of different corners. And these reports, the Economist, Transparency International, the fact that the U.S. Embassy is coming out, and others, and the so-called colorful revolutionaries, who I know you have mentioned time and again, are either working for the government or they've kind of left the country and given up and things like that. So, and let's be honest, the powers that be, the Western elites, the progressives, whatever you want to call them, they've accomplished their main goal of getting Macedonia into NATO. This whole kerfluffle with Bulgaria and the EU membership, etc., just doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Obviously, Bulgaria's got their elections in late March. We'll see what happens there. But Macedonia, perhaps Albania too, aren't getting into the EU anytime soon. So maybe they are the Western elites are looking at this and saying, we've accomplished part of our goal. This other thing's going to take a while. The country actually does need, some sort of economic investment. People are getting grumpy. That could create other problems of sorts in the region, especially as we alluded to with Kosovo and Albania, and we'll talk about that shortly. So maybe they have finally determined, Cvetin, that Zoran Zaev has played his assigned role. He has been the useful idiot to them that they always took him for, even though he never quite got onto that, never caught on to the fact that he actually, in their eyes, is an idiot. And now it's time for him to be dismissed. We'll see. We have the local elections coming up in the fall. I know Vomero called for having early general elections then, and Zaev shot that down. But there's a long time, actually, between now and October. So I think that all remains to be seen.
Yeah, there was a vote in the parliament on Dimitrov, and Zaev lost like 7 seats, but it was probably, they assumed that it's not going to be a risky vote, so not all of their people showed up, but yeah, it was still noticeable that Dimitrov didn't get all 62 votes. I mean, Ahmeti didn't bother to travel to Skopje to vote for him, etc. So, and there is another vote coming on now on the 2 corruption ministers, on Bojan Maricic, and who's the justice minister, and on Ljubčo Nikolovski, who's the deputy prime minister assigned to fight corruption. And he seems to be becoming more aggressive, more vocal in the past period, which coupled with the U.S. Embassy statement, even led to some speculations that he will be now tapped to be the new face of the Zaev regime. And he's a total Zaev loyalist, other than that, completely a non-entity. But maybe have him as the new face of the government, while even possibly replacing Zaev. So that's one development, and we'll see how many votes will the ruling coalition put together to defend Maricic and Nikolovsky. And yeah, other than that, other interesting development is this international criticism. We really, while the Transparency International is a new thing, the Economist, which we discussed, it's an old development that Macedonia is ranked as a hybrid regime. And we really didn't pay much attention to it because the Economist completely supported the name change operation. To their correspondent in the Balkans, Tim Judah, they were very vocal in, criticizing Vomero, covering up unpleasant facts about Zaev, They were completely in the tank for Zaev and the name change, so we really didn't take seriously this designation of hybrid regime, and I don't think they even bothered to really explain their thinking behind it, their arguments, their criteria behind the ranking, while transparency does much more in this regard. But it's interesting that at least that they're not giving their guy Zaev a better ranking. They're still keeping him as hybrid regime. I mean, now we completely earned the designation after so many opposition officials have been put in prison or charged in completely partisan witch hunt trials without any evidence or using edited wiretaps as evidence. So, we really actually do have political prisoners now. So we actually deserve the ranking. But you would expect that it would go the other way, that, they were so openly partisan in The Economist that they would give Zaev a new ranking now, but they didn't. So, we'll see if that's also something, or if they're just lazy to update their criteria.
It's Balkan fatigue, perhaps. Yeah, you're right. The Economist has always been a left-wing newspaper, although it's actually in magazine format. Never figured that one out. But yeah, on all issues, it is far to the left. And you mentioned Tim Judah. And I do recall many times in the past couple of years after the so-called name change where they used the adjective North Macedonian when describing somebody or something.
Oh yeah, you started your ranking with them.
Right, yeah. North Macedonian this, North Macedonian that. I don't know if they've changed that, if that's part of their official policy to call things in Macedonia that should be called Macedonian, North Macedonian or not, might be, but that just goes to, the bigger picture that the whole name change was more than just about a name. It was about changing an identity as well. And Macedonians know that.
I think they did. We all gave him hell on Twitter once. The first time he did it, and then he was protecting the treaty and said, "Listen, no, we're gonna implement it in the most favorable conditions for you Macedonians, and we're gonna change it." But I don't know if they're focused on this.
Well, yeah, I don't have a subscription. Why would I have a subscription? Why would I pay good money for a newspaper that is left-wing, and most of their stuff is behind paywalls online, so I can't read the whenever they do write about Macedonia, which is not too often these days. I can't read if they're writing North Macedonian or not. Same thing with Financial Times, another left-wing British newspaper.
Oh yeah, they were horrible.
Well, frankly, the only good newspapers I know two good newspapers out there that I trust, and that's the Wall Street Journal and the UK's Tory Telegraph. Sorry, still call it the Torygraph. The Telegraph are the only two, and I need to get a subscription to those. But going back to identity, we're contractually obligated to talk about Bulgaria at least once a podcast. So, and I mentioned it in the monologue. The latest development, even as we wait for the elections in Bulgaria, the latest development being that Vlado Buchkovsky, the quote-unquote envoy from Zoran Zaev to make nice with the Bulgarians, was over there last week and I guess agreed to Bulgarian demands, at least one of the TV channels. I don't know if it's Bulgarian State TV or another one that's now going to air part-time on Macedonian airwaves, and then other Bulgarian TV channels piled on and said, no, you got to give us airtime as well. And then I may have missed it, but wasn't there also a Serbian channel that wanted to get on?
That's a long-standing demand from Bulgaria, and honestly, we have a practice here that all cable operators offer practically all the Serbian channels, Bosnia, Montenegro, etc., which people have been accustomed to watching and like to watch due to the legacy of Yugoslavia. We have bunches of Albanian channels for the Albanians, Slovenian
those are on
channel.
the cable networks.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what else they want to do. I assume they want to do it on the cable channels. I really don't understand how else they want to do it. This is how 90% of the people get their news. The rest are only getting the Macedonian television and nothing else. So I'm not really sure what the plan is. Only the Macedonian television broadcasts in the old what's it called, terrestrial broadcasting.
Right.
Everything else goes.
Rabbit ears on your TV, with the antenna.
I mean there is the one of the channels of the Macedonian television is on Albanian, and a third channel is on is in the languages of the smaller minorities. So maybe the Bulgarians will want to have like the news from the Bulgarian television aired on this third channel, but they do not like this idea very much. In principle, they do not claim minority status in Macedonia. They do not demand that an elementary school has Bulgarian language education, just like there are a couple of Serbian language schools, because that's an insult to Bulgaria. They claim that Macedonian in general is Bulgarian and that all Macedonians are Bulgarian. So I don't think they would go for a minority channel, minority education. They would claim that to redefine the Macedonian language as a dialect of the Bulgarian, maybe try to alter it in the future. I mean, depending on how things develop. They do not claim a minority status. They would be sorely disappointed. They would get 10 children enroll in the first school they open.
Right.
But listen, we told. But yeah, it's been a notable omission that we do not have a Bulgarian channel on the cable offerings, and Bulgaria has claimed that this is because of bureaucratic pressures in Macedonia, because of a culture of hatred, interest in gens, and there is something to it because it's really noticeable that somebody is preventing this. I mean, I double checked over the weekend. There is no Bulgarian channel offer here. There is no on the cables. There is no Macedonian channels offered in Bulgaria on their big cable networks. And since we have all the other Balkan channels, it's really for a while there used to be several very trashy turbo folk, like this fashionable, this silicone girls jiggling on the videos. Planet Painter is the name of the company, and they would broadcast in Macedonia for a while, and then they stopped. People, I don't know if people didn't like them or they're canceled. They're no longer broadcasting. But it's a common sense request. It should be done. I doubt people will much watch it. It will actually probably contribute to hatred at the moment because people tuning in will watch news in which Macedonia will probably be featured prominently the way things are going, and the discussion will be in the sense that these deluded Bulgarians who think they're Macedonians along these lines. So it will probably have negative reaction once it starts airing, and besides, the whole thing is mute. I was in Bulgaria a few months ago for a while, and I was actually surprised how many Bulgarians watch Macedonian news intently, systematically, but they do this on YouTube. There is really no reason even to have it on the cable offering. If I'm interested in watching it, I can watch it right now. I mean, it takes me two clicks on the tablet, and I'm watching whatever news I want in Bulgaria. So it's really not a big deal in this time and age to say that.
Well, yes, but I think it is. My reading would be that because yes, the nature of media consumption around the world and how it's changing to this on-demand and streaming and everything else that you just spoke to. I think the bigger picture here, to my mind, is this constant. It's a manufactured story, and it just shows that the Bulgarians are demanding ever more, ever closer union, to use an EU phrase.
Yeah, of course.
Is what it's all about, and trying to drum it into the minds of Macedonians that they're wayward Bulgarians or whatever, and it's part of their strategy of berating and belittling the Macedonians by these constant demands, whether it's the school books or the TV channels, the media, or something else, and I think that's what it is, at least to my mind. But
they might as well ask for a newspaper. I mean, it's outdated mode of communication to make such a big deal out of it. If people want to watch it, they easily can.
Well-
But yeah, I mean, given that everything else is running, I mean, it's a common sense. It's okay. It's no big deal that it should run. I predict it's gonna, have a counter effect now that it's being hyped and people are gonna tune in the first day to watch it, and especially new journalists are gonna tune in, gonna carefully, comb through the news to catch something which is provocative, and practically all the news reports on Macedonia. I think it's
All
going to
news
start.
everywhere is provocative.
Yeah, I think it's going to start on March 1st, I think they said. And then on March 3rd is the anniversary of the San Stefano Treaty, which is still a national holiday in Bulgaria.
Yes.
And, it's literally like celebrating the prospect, the idea of having a greater Balkan state.
Yes.
And there is absolutely no way not to see it in a provocative light. I mean, just imagine what it's like if we had a holiday of unification between Vardar and Pir in Macedonia and Aegean Macedonia. The Greeks and the Bulgarians will be on our throats in a second.
It's not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah, they blame us of celebrating this, of using this as imagery in schools, etc. Or if Albania starts, openly discussing, Greater Albania as they do, Bulgaria actually has a national holiday on this issue. I'm surprised that Greece is not making a bigger deal out of this, because half of the expansion projected under the San Stefano Bulgaria falls on Greek's head. So yeah, we could have the Bulgarian national television start broadcasting on the 1st, and we could have a major scandal on the 3rd.
Lovely. Their timing is exquisite. Yes.
Yeah.
Might be designed that way. Well, since we're talking about greater states in the Balkans, greater Bulgaria, greater Macedonia, greater Albania, greater Greece, greater whatever, greater Serbia, got to throw that in there. So Kosovo is having parliamentary elections. Do we have a date? What's the date on that?
Oh crap, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But anyway, they've got parliamentary elections coming up. So they've got the various parties that are fighting in that. And you mentioned, I missed this. So it's Haradinaj's party is got a platform which includes Kosovo joining with Albania. Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, they always even when in the past when Edi Rama would mention this, it's always couched in the formula of unless we get EU membership.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so it's a
Hint,
form
hint,
of
wink,
blackmail.
wink, nudge,
of the
nudge, say
EU.
no more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is now his platform. I mean, the polls are now again predicting that this protest party, the Vetvendosia movement, which is pretty, very much nationalist on its own, is going to win the way things are going.
That's Albin Kurti, correct?
Yeah.
But
he
he can't
won it.
run. He's been barred from running.
No, I think he can. Yeah, he has some kind of like a criminal charge, but I think.
Exactly.
But even if anyway, I think they can make him a prime minister or something.
Right.
I don't think it's going to be a big obstacle. He was actually, hilariously toppled in a coup organized by the Trump administration. Probably
Exactly.
the only coup of the. It's really.
Right.
It's really out of this world, unless we count the removal of Gruevski, which technically happened under the Trump administration's term, but in the first months of it.
But all organized by the State Department.
Yeah, and with Kurti predicted to win, then the old war wing parties, which are the former commanders of the UČK, who practically held a lock on Kosovo politics since the war in '99, they are now obviously concerned, and they need to up the stakes. And Haradinaj is upping the stakes with a call for unification. Kosovo and Albania, not yet calling for Macedonia, but it's very clear that if this happens, if Kosovo and Albania unify, Macedonia is obviously going to be the next first on the carving block after this happens.
Well, and I'm an old Balkan hand. I've been studying this, as I mentioned earlier, for almost 30 years now, 3 decades. And of course, all of the so-called experts, I'm using air quotes here, said that will never happen. These states will never join. They can't join. There's international rules and agreements and blah, 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 blah that says that they can't do that. And yet, what are you going to do if they say we're going to go ahead and join? You're going to send an army in? I mean, Albania is a NATO member state. Kosovo is protected by NATO and has, Camp Bondsteel is there. And you've got, NATO troops there. How does that work in practice? I don't know. But it's. I think in this brave new world that we're entering, the United States is in a position of its late empire. It's in a position of decline. The ascendant power, of course, is China, and we'll talk about that in relation to the coronavirus in a few minutes here. The ascendant power is China around the world, but especially in, obviously Africa, Latin America, and of course Europe. And so how does all this fit in with that? I don't know. It's something worth thinking about and talking with others and watching.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. toppled Kurti practically with, frequent visits, calls to the other parties to form a majority. And then, once practically the plan was to install Hashim Taci and use him to redraw the borders between Serbia and Kosovo, which he was installed. I mean, he was practically, they formed a government which was much more to Taci's liking and his control. And then as he was flying to the US, to DC to sign the treaty with Vucic and Trump, remember the Hague Tribunal declared him a war criminal mid-flight.
Right.
So, I mean, this would be the approach the US would use if, Haradinaj does well, is part of a future government. Edi Rama is dissatisfied with the drop in, with the lack of EU integration for Albania, and then, drops in the polls and tries to, raise the issue for VL. They would, the US would probably leak some wiretaps on them. We've seen how they do it with Gruevski. Use the special tribunal in Pristina and Hague to go after the people in Kosovo. I mean, this is, they would pick up the phone to the prosecutor of Albania to, file some charges against Edi Rama, bring down his government. This is how the US does it now. But the thing is that, as we saw with Kurti and with Taci, there are dueling factions in the US. Now that Trump is out, maybe this will no longer be an issue. With what little foreign policy influence he had, he focused it on on poor old Kosovo. But it was still, we've seen diplomats here in Macedonia working for the higher bidder. It's really, and nobody pays more than the Kosovars in this region. So Who knows? Who knows?
Right. Yeah. Well, wasn't it in the let me get this straight, the Biden-Harris administration, the Biden-Harris State Department, I think, was calling the other day, even though they've been in office for less than 3 weeks, for Serbia to go ahead and basically recognize Kosovo.
They do this every year practically. They did it to us as well. They would send a letter of congratulations on the 8th of September on our Ilinden, and they would definitely make sure to include a comment in this that we look anxiously on you, Mr. Gruevski, that you need to resolve the dispute with Greece as soon as possible. And then during the Colored Revolution times, they would, I think, also add something about fighting crime, respecting the prosecutor we installed, something like that. So they do this to Serbia as well. They tell Serbia in the congratulations on Serbian national holiday that you also need to resolve your issue with Kosovo by recognizing it.
Right.
And, this is a huge insult to the country which you're congratulating its national day to, and the Serbs responded angrily to this, like, thank you for the letter, but we're never doing this. So yeah, it's a really, really ugly move from the U.S. It's completely out of tune with Balkan sentimentality, and I'm sure the U.S. knows this, and the people writing this know it.
Right, but again, going back to my point on how the United States is in a position of late empire, it's in its descent, and China is in the ascendancy. Maybe I'm 20 or 30 years too early right now in suggesting that, yes, the United States State Department plays these games and does these things. That won't always be the case, though. And when the Chinese are in the words of Kent Brockman, become our ant overlords, then how does that work? I don't know. I guess I need to bone up on Chinese foreign policy a little bit. So, although we've got a pretty good idea of what it is. What's that?
They're helping us out at this moment.
Yeah.
That was the funny development today. After insisting, our government refused the Russian vaccine, didn't even initiate talks with the Chinese. The Russians offered it, actually, met with the government and made an offer, and they said the government never got back to us. So after refusing these two offers and saying, no, we're going to buy the Western vaccine, only Pfizer, nothing else is good enough for us. And now when they realize that they can't even get donated Pfizers from Serbia or Bulgaria, they can't buy it for money, they can't get it through the COVAX mechanism. The government today, the healthcare minister signed a contract with China for 200,000 doses of the Chinese vaccine. And this is particularly hilarious for the minister, because one of the biggest scandals he did in 2018 for the referendum, for the name change referendum, the ministry joined in the all-out assault on the public, forcing us to vote. They purchased billboards across the country, and the billboard said, vote yes for joining the EU, and once we join, we're going to get all the best quality European vaccines all the time, plus free healthcare in the EU. Wherever you want to go to whichever EU state, you'll be treated for free. And
how's it working out for you?
Yeah, very well. On the second point, people said, okay, everybody who knows a little bit about anything said, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
On free healthcare in Europe. And on the first issue, they said, okay, but does this mean that at the moment we do not get the best quality vaccines from the EU, from Europe, from European manufacturers? Are we getting some second-hand Balkan bootleg vaccines? And it was
bathtub
major.
Vaccine.
Yeah, it was major own goal for Filipče, and now today he had the logical ending of this disaster when he had to persuade us and promise us, well, the Chinese vaccine is not all that bad either. They're mighty safe.
Yeah.
It was great.
Well, good. So you're going to get 200,000 doses maybe in March sometime, but of course 200,000 doses is 100,000 people if you've got to get 2 shots, 2 jabs, as they say.
Yeah.
And even if you take it that Macedonia is only 1.6 million people, that's a really small percentage of the entire population. And I know that there's a certain percentage that doesn't want to get vaccinated at all, et cetera, et cetera. But you guys got a lot of work to do in terms of. But you know what? You're a NATO member. NATO and Macedonia stand shoulder to shoulder. I would think that NATO would be offering some help and assistance other than masks. I mean, you walk down, when I was there last month, you walk down the street and it's like you used to see used condoms all over the place. Now you see used masks all over the place. Yeah. So we're over-masked as a society. Well, congratulations on your purchase of 200,000 doses of the coronavirus vaccine from China.
NATO landed a few respirators today, like 4, I think. We have the Slovak foreign minister coming. They had this fight with Bulgaria, which was probably engineered by Germany or somebody like that. When Slovakia and the Czech Republic blocked Bulgaria from making Macedonia changing its history an official requirement in one of the several EU documents, which is not the most important document, but it would have been an important move for Bulgaria to secure this, and Slovakia and the Czech Republic suddenly figured that it affects them as well, because Cyril and Methodius are claimed by Bulgaria, claimed by Macedonia, but honored in Slovakia and the Czech Republic too, so they vetoed Bulgaria's move, and now they're kind of like our buddies in the EU, Zaev's buddies. Nobody else comes to visit him. That's becoming noticeable, that no internationals are inviting him or coming over. Gone are the days of 2018 in the referendum when Merkel and Theresa May would bump into each other in the Skopje airport, coming to support Zaev. But we had a Slovak minister. He came and he brought 4 ventilators, and that's about it. No vaccines. Bulgaria promised, Serbia promised, nobody delivered, and neither of the bigger countries is delivering anything to Zaev. So we get the Chinese vaccines now, and we'll see how that works. And they have a plan. So they're just going to give it first to the doctors working on corona, and people over 75 is the first category. Then the second category is other doctors, some of the teachers, I think, etc. And people under, I think, 65 to 75 with some illnesses or something like that. And then they're going to give it to teachers younger than 65 with illnesses. They'll see how far the 100,000, 200,000 doses stretch.
You left out one category there, Cvetin. The politicians. When are they getting it?
I think they're number 2. I think they're in the second branch. But I think they're going to give, like the most important politicians, like in other countries, they're going to give them the shot. I think among the first people, just like they will say, we're setting an example. But I'm pretty sure that Zaev and the rest have already gotten the Pfizer vaccines through some back channels. And Filipč's other major vaccine scandal, other than the billboards, was that he had, there was around the same time in 2018, there was kind of like anti-vaxxer movement on the MMRP vaccine, what's it called in the US, I think. This mumps, rubella.
No idea, sorry.
Yeah, the common kids vaccine, the one you give to kids. So he wanted to set an example, and he had a baby, which he said, "This is my niece. I'm giving it. I'm holding it while a nurse is giving it a shot. So you know that the vaccine is safe." And people could easily notice that the vaccine, that the needle has a cap on it while it's pressed on the baby's arm, and that the baby is way too young to receive the vaccine.
Right.
And after a while, Filipče had to acknowledge, okay, yes, it was my attempt at a PR campaign to assure you, but maybe it wasn't the smartest move on my part, because yes, it was not an actual vaccine. She didn't really.
Correct. Yes, it wasn't the smartest move on my part because it was a lie.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah.
That was horrible.
Oh, when was that?
2017, 2018.
Oh, wow.
2018,
Okay.
I think.
Wow, that's a good one to remember. So we can dig that one up.
Yeah, numbers of vaccinations actually dropped significantly at the time.
Oh.
Women going on Facebook, watching Serbian doctors tell you how it's, they're using aborted fetus cells in the vaccines, and people, stopped doing it, and thousands of people stopped doing it, and Philip just started a campaign. They actually banned children from enrolling in school unless they're vaccinated. This campaign obviously now is, it had some initial success. Now it's obviously going nowhere because children are not going to school anyway. So, so I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, indeed. Well, all right. Well, I think that's a full wrap. We kind of covered everything that we wanted to. We didn't talk about the census, which I know sounds like it's going to be delayed a couple of months. So.
Yeah.
That's some sort of good news, I guess, even though it's still going to be a mess, as we know. But we can cover that.
Then we're going to start collecting signatures to actually
Right.
shut down the law, which the big problem is that it's going to include immigrants, which Albanians insist on because they want to count their huge immigration population as actually living in Macedonia to, insist that they're over 20-25%. But yeah, it's a long story. We can get to it in a later podcast.
Then we'll get to the next one. Yeah, well, this is episode 101 of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. We're recording this on Monday the 8th, so we'll drop this probably tomorrow, Tuesday the 9th of February. Short month.
We hit it on Rumble the last time, besides YouTube,
that's right.
and I think it's gonna. I mean, it was very painfully slow to upload for some reason, and it actually dragged down my YouTube upload at the same time, so I need to do it separately. But yeah, I mean, it's a Macedonian company. We're gonna continue to patron it. It's not big tech, so one small contribution to fighting.
Absolutely.
Big tech censorship.
Every bit helps. So yeah, follow us on YouTube and Rumble. If you want to sponsor, let us know. We'll keep asking. But anyway, good to catch up with you, Cvetin, on all these issues.
Yeah, you too, buddy. Take care.
You too.